Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Outliers YouTube channel and our program, Get to Know. I'm your host, DP Lyle, and I'm here with my cohort in crime, Kathleen Antrim.
Thanks, Doug. It is great to be here. And we are here today with one of my all-time favorite authors, and I'm very, very excited to have him. We've got Joseph Binder. He is a New York Times bestselling author of over 18 books. He has had two of his books, High Crimes and Paranoia, made into movies, and he is going to share with us all kinds of wisdom about writing and behind-the-scenes scoops. And Joe, welcome. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be here, especially with you guys.
Yeah, it's great to see you.
Been too long. I know, it's so great to see you.
Yeah.
So I want to know about your childhood a little bit. I'm really curious as to whether you feel your childhood factored into you becoming a writer, and whether you were a shy child, an outgoing child. Were you athletic? Were you, was your nose stuck in a book? Did you have imaginary friends?
Yeah.
Etc. Do share.
All right. So, I spent the first 5 or 6 years of my life living abroad. So I was born in Chicago, and then we immediately moved to the Philippines. And then after a couple of years, moved to Afghanistan. And before I learned English, I actually learned Farsi because my parents were gone during the day.
Oh my gosh.
And so I was sort of raised by the servants. And I think that is what really got me interested in international thrillers, just being exposed to that sort of thing. Both of my parents were professors.
Okay.
And my dad never taught me how to throw a ball. Okay. So I did not develop any athletic ability until I got to college. So I was not an athletic kid. But I read a lot. And when I was a kid, I wrote books there are five kids in my family, and I wrote books for my brothers and sisters.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, and then I wrote some scary ones. I sort of knew exactly what would scare my brothers and sisters. When I was 8, I discovered this great series of kids' books, sort of sci-fi for kids, starting with a book called The Wonderful Flight to the Mushroom Planet. And I loved this book so much, and I turned my friends onto it and everything. And I loved it so much that I wrote to the author. And I got back a form letter like 3 months later, and on the address of the envelope was Eleanor Cameron, that's her name, Eleanor Cameron's home address. So I wrote to her and I said, "You haven't answered my questions." And I asked my questions again, and she wrote back like a 2 or 3 page typed letter. And I thought this was sort of mind-blowing that I was actually hearing from this person who created this book. And it sort of taught me on some fundamental level that behind every novel was a human being, a person who created this. And that was when I decided I want to do what she does. So does that answer your question about putting me on the couch?
Yeah. And so do you still speak Farsi?
No, I've forgotten it.
Have you?
Yeah. I speak Russian, with whatever good that does me, but not Farsi.
I don't know. Russian these days, you might get recruited by one of the alphabet agencies. I don't know.
Yeah. I have. Yeah.
Have you? So tell us about that.
Yeah. So when I was in college, I majored in Russian. And what I studied, what my thesis was on, was Russian politics and intelligence policy. And one of my professors invited me out to lunch one day which is not usual. It didn't happen at a big university. And I was introduced to a guy who worked for the CIA, who thought I would make a really good fit. And I thought about it and decided that I didn't want to work for a government agency.
Sure.
So that was my recruiting story. It's nothing fancy.
But I heard a rumor somewhere that you might have done, not even though you weren't a case officer, you might have done a little bit of work. Can you share any of that?
No,
Okay.
not on a recording. No.
Cannot confirm nor deny.
They will hunt you down.
Sorry. Yes. Yes.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So, when did you graduate college? Did you have another job, or did you just start writing right away?
No, I went to grad school at a place called the Russian Research Center at Harvard, and I studied Russian and Soviet politics and intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
And
now, what year was this? Were we still Cold War years?
yeah, this was the 80s. This was the early 80s. And I learned that I did not want to become an academic. That was not for me. Definitely not for me. And a few years later, I decided to try to write a novel. Actually, the first book I wrote was a nonfiction book.
Okay.
I was really young to write it. I was like 23 when I wrote this book. And it was about Dr. Armand Hammer and his links to the Soviet Union. And this was really the first book in which I was able to prove that he worked for the KGB. And he freaked out about this book. I mean, he threatened a lawsuit. He eventually, what he did was, instead of suing me for libel, he had his associates buy up as many copies of the book as possible so it wouldn't appear in any bookstores.
Oh my gosh.
So it sold really well.
That's great.
Yeah.
Then they had a big book burning, but but that's all right. They were sold in.
Right.
Oh my gosh. So you actually got rewarded for your efforts.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's kind of cool. And then what was your next book? What was your first novel?
My first novel was a book called The Moscow Club. And it was actually my way of telling in fiction what I couldn't tell in nonfiction in my first book.
Okay.
So I had a character who was sort of based on Dr. Armand Hammer. He was my fictional character in this book, who had this illegal, illicit relationship with Russia. And my hero was a CIA analyst. His father was targeted during the McCarthy era.
Oh, okay.
And so it was sort of a fictional working of what I went through writing my first book, my nonfiction book.
Very, very cool. Love that. So then, at this point now, your career is launched because you've had your nonfiction book sold really well.
Yeah. And my first book, my first novel, sold really well. It sold eventually about 500,000 copies in mass market paperback.
Fantastic.
Which was amazing.
Yeah. And how old were you? You're in your 20s, right?
Well, I must have been, by that point, I must have been 30 or 31, something.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. But still pretty young.
Yeah.
I sort of feel like, I meet writers or aspiring writers who sort of feel, oh my God, I'm in my 30s, I'm in my 40s, it's too late. And I sort of think that is totally wrong.
Yeah.
It's better if you start later when you've had more life experiences.
Sure.
When you've read more, when you've thought a lot more about what kind of book you want to write, it's better to start later. with your first book.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I didn't publish my first book till I was in my 50s. I mean,
Is that right?
yeah, and I've got
Yeah.
26 now, but it's never too late. And that's the beauty of writing is as long as you're breathing, you can write. You know, it's
Right.
not like trying to play a
Exactly.
sport, where your
Right.
body wears out,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the beauty of it.
That's
So
right.
talk to us a little bit about your process. Are you an outliner? Are you a pantser? How do you go about writing a novel?
So I'm both.
Okay.
Okay. So I come up with an idea and I read about it, I think about it, I talk to people, I brainstorm, and I come up with the sort of main plot points that I want to deal with in my book, sort of in this messy way.
Mhm.
And what I then do is I write an outline for about the first 25% of the book.
Okay.
So I really feel I need to sort of get that first turning point in the book set up. And the best way for me is to do an outline of some sort.
Mhm.
But so I start writing, not knowing where it's going to go from there. So after I've gotten to that launching point in the book, this first major point, I just start going in a pantsing sort of way.
Yeah.
Just sort of without outlining. And it's by the time I'm sort of strapped in and really moving, that works for me, that idea of just not having it all written down, just going.
Mhm, mhm. And
I agree 100%. I've tried both, and my first books were outlined. And what I found is after I spent 2 months working on the outline and getting it all hammered out, I'd written the book and I was bored. Yeah,
Exactly
I
right.
didn't want to sit down and do the heavy lifting of writing the thing because I'd already told myself the story. So then I started I'd have 2 or 3 scenes in mind, and I know which scene I was going to open with. Just start with that and see where it goes. Even
Yeah.
though your brain has some things that are coming, you don't know how you're going to get there, but they're coming, and that's kind of what you're saying here.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, so I knew Robert Ludlum. We had the same agent, and I got to know him a
cool.
little bit.
Yeah, cool.
And
Very cool.
Ludlum told me, we sat down and he told me, do an outline as detailed as you can for the whole book before you start to write a word. And I said, how long are your outlines? And he said, they could be as long as 200 pages, single spaced.
That's a novel.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I tried that with a book, and I had the same experience as you did, Doug, where I basically sort of felt, this is boring now. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
So that sort of took a lot of the joy out of writing the book. I sort of felt like a factory worker where I had to fill in the pieces, and that was boring.
It's still not written yet, and it's still not ready for editing, which I enjoy. I enjoy the second rewrite and the third rewrite. Now I enjoy that. You haven't written it yet, and yet you have written it. Yeah, it's a dichotomy that's pretty. It's weird. But I understand completely, and I like the idea of hit the streets running.
Yes.
And then when you turn the corner at the end of the block, the world opens up. You say, okay, where am I going next?
I can do anything now. Where am I going to go?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I might have some obligatory moments. I sort of think, I think of my outline as being like a movie trailer. Like, what would you see in a movie trailer?
Yeah.
What are the main exciting points? And I'll write those down. And so if I'm writing and I can't figure out where to go next, I look at my little trailer notes. And I say, oh yeah, that scene, that's cool. Let's write that scene. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about this wonderful book.
Yes.
Because this is an outstanding book from the first scene to the last.
Thank you.
And obviously your Russian background, your Russian intelligence background is very operative in this book. So tell us how you came up with this concept and how this story developed.
And I also want to know if you've traveled to Russia and done kind of some research that way.
Well, let me start with your question, Kathy. I have been to Russia a number of times. For one time, I lived there for a month.
Oh, wow.
But for this book, I was talking to a guy in the FBI for it, and he did some research on my background, and he said, "Do not go to Russia."
Oh,
They thought that I might be on a list, and
huh.
it suggested that I not go. And this was right after, well, it was a couple of years after the Wall Street Journal, Evan Gershkovich,
Right.
arrested. And I realized if I get arrested over there for something, they would
They
put
trump.
drugs in my luggage or whatever it is. If I got arrested, I wouldn't have the Wall Street Journal behind me.
Right.
I'm just a writer, and my publisher wouldn't get involved. So I decided not to go
Yeah.
to Moscow.
And with your background, they would absolutely see you as spy material. Absolutely.
Yes.
For
Yeah.
sure.
And you couldn't talk your way out of it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So no, instead what I did was I interviewed a number of Russians and a number of businessmen who had traveled to Russia
Mhm.
very recently. And I did a lot of research, a lot of interviewing, and that on top of the fact that I'd been to Moscow a number of times,
Right.
made it work for me. So Doug, you asked me, how did I come up with the book?
Yeah.
So it actually started with the idea of could somebody disappear in this day and age? Could someone actually go off the grid in an age of Facebook and email and closed circuit TV cameras?
And credit cards and
Yeah, all this stuff, credit cards, exactly. Could you live a life off the grid totally? And this is kind of like an old thriller premise. Could you disappear into the woodwork? But could it happen today? So it started with this. And then I started working on that. And then I thought, so why is he off the grid? What's he running from? And I just came up with this idea. My brother told me about this girl that he knew in college who's going out with the son of a Russian oligarch, and how they had security guards around them every time they went out. I thought that's kind of interesting. And what would it be like to actually get in? What would it be like to marry someone, whose father or mother was a Russian oligarch? What would that be like? And so once I came up with that idea, the book just took off.
wow.
But, I found this to be a really exciting premise, and I brought the two strands of the plot together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's sort of basically how I came up with the story.
And I have to wonder, what would inspire somebody to want to date a Russian oligarch? I mean, that's frightening in and of itself that you have to have that much security around you.
Yeah.
Like what?
So the way the book is set up, and I guess I can talk about this without spoiling too much, but the way the book is set up, our hero, a guy named Paul, meets this woman. He has no idea who she is.
Right.
They go out on several dates, and he begins to fall in love with her, and we see why. And it's not until he's known her for a long time that he meets her father and the penny drops. And he just says, "Oh my God, why didn't you tell me?" And she said, "Because I thought if I told you, you'd break up with me." And so he gets involved with her before knowing who she is.
And she lives a very modest life. And so he doesn't know she's just another person in the city, that he likes and falls in love with. And the next thing you know, she says, "Oh, by the way."
Yeah.
That's a big
And the way you unfold that, it's like, oh, Lord. Though
Yeah,
the title suggested that that's probably where it was going, but
right,
until
right.
you get there early on, really in the book, I mean, it's not, you learn early on, and then all the chases start and all the stuff starts
Yeah,
because her father, very gracious man who has iron teeth.
right, right, exactly. Yeah,
Wow.
so that twist happens pretty early on in the book.
Yeah.
And you know, he becomes interesting all of a sudden to American intelligence. To
Mm.
figure out a way into this oligarch,
Mhm.
getting information on him. So they put the squeeze on him to try to get information
Right.
on his father-in-law. Right. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, you know, he can't tell his wife. He feels so guilty and disloyal for spying on his father-in-law. It's just
Oh,
emotionally, it's a really difficult situation
Yes.
as
oh
well.
my gosh, I can't
And
wait.
becomes more and more isolated. He's more and more on his own, which is classic thriller storytelling because
Yeah.
all his options get lopped off, and pretty soon, he's left at the top of the tree with no branches. It's that kind of
Exactly,
thing. Yeah, yeah. Well
exactly
done.
right.
So, any nibbles yet from the movie industry? Because this sounds like a movie to me.
Yeah, well, yes, the answer is yes.
Mhm.
And um, the annoying thing is, so we've been negotiating for months,
Ugh,
and we're down to
Hollywood.
one last back end point. And
Mhm.
until this point is resolved, I can't announce it. But
Sure.
I have a great writer and showrunner who's adapting it for a TV series,
Oh, love it.
and an amazing producer who's really into this. So this is farther along than most of my options have ever been. So,
Very cool.
so I
Yeah.
can't, I'm hoping to be able to announce it in a week or two. I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah,
No, it's okay, but oh,
you know
just
how
so
it
excited
works.
to
It's
hear that.
delicate
Yeah.
to negotiate.
Yes. Yeah.
But I
Yeah,
mean, once you've got,
we had a number of nibbles, bites,
yeah,
and we went with this one largely because of the writer showrunner who wants to adapt it, who's got an
Yeah.
amazing
yeah.
track record.
Because I was going to say, once you've got a showrunner attached, that's a very big deal. That's like
Exactly.
the
Exactly.
person. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Otherwise, it's just another Hollywood option where nothing
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So very cool. So tell us and our listeners where they can get your book, which is, I'm sure, everywhere.
Everywhere as of January 28th. And it's got a really good audio. And I'll tell you, the audio, a lot of people I know listen to books on audio.
Yeah,
Mhm.
me too. Yeah.
And more popular. It's become huge. And I auditioned the narrators for this book.
Mm.
And because I wanted someone who could do a Russian accent in English, who could sound like my oligarch
Yeah.
and not sound like a cartoon character, you know?
Yeah. No
Uh,
Boris Badenoch.
No, Boris
you got
Badenoch.
it, Boris Badenoch. Did
Yeah.
not want him to sound like Squirrel and Moose.
Right.
Right? That's a
Right.
rough.
We're
kids,
dating
that is a
ourselves.
We're
reference
dating ourselves. Yes.
It's really old. Sorry. Right. Anyway, so the narrator, a guy named Mark Bramhall, is really good. And so I haven't heard the audio yet, but I know it's going to be really good.
Oh, so
The
cool.
audio as well as the ebook and the usual forms.
Oh, so exciting. So Joseph Fender, The Oligarch's Daughter, do not miss it. It's probably going to be, well, I
And
know
it's coming in January, correct?
January 28th,
Yeah,
2025. It's going to be one of the best books of 2025. I have no doubt.
Thank
So
you.
excited. Also, hopefully a TV series to come.
Mhm.
Joe, thank you so much for being with us. It's so awesome to have you on. And
Great
you're just one
talking
of my
with you.
all-time favorites.
It's always a pleasure. We don't get to see you enough, Joe.
I
No,
know. We'll have you,
Thank
we've
you
got to
for
have you
having
back
me.
on for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Outstanding
absolutely.
interview. A lot of fun.
All right. Until next time.
Until next time.
Well, this has been Get to Know on the Outliers YouTube channel. And as you know, we'll be back with other interviews. And until then, keep the faith, keep writing, keep reading, keep having fun. We'll
And
see you
click
then.
that thumbs up.
Yes. Click the thumbs up.